Welcome, folks, to the inaugural edition of the Brent Bozell Show. It's a real pleasure for me to have as my guest on the inaugural edition a man who is known to the conservative movement. He was the former press secretary and acting communications director for Donald Trump. He was the former communications director and chief strategist for the Republican National Committee. Sean is now the host of the Sean Spicer Show. Sean is one of those very, very few people who has participated on both sides of the camera as press secretary in the White House, but now with his own show. The first question I want to ask you, Sean, welcome for being on the show. The first question I want to ask you, I'm going to put you on the spot right away. In your career, in the time you've had looking at this, putting yourself aside for a second, who would you rate as the best press secretary you've seen? Putting yourself aside.
Oh, great question. You mean at the White House or overall?
At the White House, serving the president the way the president would want to be served.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you, I learned a lot, and I've always admired Ari Fleischer. I think when 9/11 happened, you realize when you're at the White House, having been there now, that I can tell you that there are good days, there are bad days, there are things that you're expecting to happen, and there's a lot that you're not. And being able to go with the flow is critical. And I remember when 9/11 happened, and Ari was, you remember Air Force One was in the air, they had to get Bush out of that school, and they put him up in the air. They didn't know where he was going to go down. Cheney went down to the bunker. Ari was a very steady, calm voice, and he reassured the nation that we were all good, that the president was in charge, the president had a plan. And it's moments like that that are the difference between a good press secretary and a great press secretary. And so, for a lot of people who've never been there before, it's easy to say, it's sort of like taking a pitch from a major league pitcher. It's easy to say, I could stand there and hit that ball, until you stand there and watch it whiz by and go, wow, it's actually a lot harder than I thought. Having stood at that podium and know what it takes to take tough questions, never mind during a time of crisis, I've always admired the job that Ari did.
I'm glad you say that. I told Sarah Huckabee Sanders once, and she was rather surprised when I said this. I meant this, I was dead serious when I said this, that I thought she had, the press secretary role, is the most difficult role in all of politics. And that surpasses the president and the vice president and the Speaker of the House and everyone else, from the standpoint that you're on the spot and you're looking at the enemy. If you're a Republican press secretary, you're the enemy. And they've got their guns and they've got machine guns loaded on you, and you've got to fend off the attacks every single time you're talking to the press. And she did a marvelous job. I love your suggestion. Ari is fantastic. Okay, so now I got to reverse it. I've got to ask you, who's the worst?
Oh, I don't think that's even close. Karine Jean-Pierre is hands down the worst person to take that job. She struggles with basic sentences. I think the big difference, though, Brent, is to your point about there is a big difference between Republican versus Democrat, who's doing the job. Then there's Trump Republican versus regular Republican. As I said, I think Ari did a great job. I think that when you look at how hostile they were to any of the four Trump press secretaries, it was exponentially different. What KJP gets away with on a daily basis, I would have given one day. I mean, I would just love one day where they treated me like that, where you could say things that were nonsensical, that were massively full of mistruths, of disinformation, and get away with it. It is pathetic that you guys call this out all the time in the videos that you put out, but there's only one reporter there that gets called on, which is Peter Doocy. And it's not even that Peter asked tough questions. He asked common sense questions. President Biden said X. You guys said Y 2 days later. How do you reconcile that? And they go, oh my gosh, look at the tough question that Doocy just asked. He asked, I think, very common sense, but that shows you that no one else there is even asking those kind of questions, tough ones, accountability, calling out the myths, truths, and the attempts to dissuade people from obvious things. I mean, we talk about the border all the time, and these guys have been able to obfuscate for years about that. But what she gets away with is something that most press secretaries could only dream of.
Well, what do you make of the decision that was made to put Biden in front of the camera 2 or 3 weeks ago when after the report came out that questioned his cognitive abilities? What do you make of that disastrous 20 minutes?
Number one, there's no question that was his call. I mean, if it wasn't, his staff should all be fired. That was the idea of doing something at that hour in that venue was horrible, was stupid. I mean, it was malpractice if they didn't try to forcefully stop him. It was late in the day, which is tough for anybody. Just at the end of the day, your mind is a little bit more tired. You're not as sharp. They did it in a very awkward room where the press was kind of right on top of him. He was standing. The whole thing looked clunky. And my guess is that he overrode them and said, I'm going to go do this. Because that was a horrible, horrible decision. And we immediately saw the consequences of that when he couldn't maintain the difference between the Mexican president and the president of Egypt. He actually added to the narrative that Robert Hur was getting at in the special counsel's report, that he didn't have the mental acuity to basically know right from wrong, et cetera. But that had to have been his call. Or two other things. One, we know what time the White House staff goes home, and that they had all gone home at 6 o'clock and no one could stop them, or that they are that weak. But it has to be one of the three.
Yeah, I agree with you completely, but I do believe that there's an incredible weakness, political weakness in this administration. You don't get the sense, during the Obama years, during the Clinton years, there were some powerful political operatives working out of the White House. I haven't seen anything. But Dr. Phil made a great statement on Fox last week when, I don't know if this is his line or if he's quoting somebody, but he's talking about that test and why Biden wouldn't take a cognitive test when he took his physical. He said a man who has nothing to hide doesn't hide anything. And clearly, the Biden people are trying to hide his and any medical reports on him, which leads you to believe that they'll go into the basement strategy. Now, I fundamentally disagree with a lot of people who believe that Biden was employing a basement strategy in 2020 because he couldn't face the cameras. I think he could back in 2020. I think he was doing it because I think Trump was making a terrible mistake by going in front of the cameras every single day, and Biden was not going to get in the way of that. However, do you believe, as I believe, that they will put him in the basement this time around because they have no choice?
Yeah, it's going to be the equivalent of the basement where they shuffle him out for photo ops, quick comments, and then he's back. The problem that they face is you hear all this criticism that they just need to get him out there more. The guy can't get up the short stairs. At some point, they're going to have one of those little lifts, where they sit him up the side of Air Force One. But the fundamental problem is that both physically he's frail and mentally he's frail. And so they can't fix it, and they can't make him Benjamin Button. They can't make him younger so they're screwed is what it comes down to, and that's why you see the basically they're not campaigning on the record. They're just going to go after Trump and democracy and all this stuff, these existential ideas, as opposed to issue specific, because they don't have much more to work with. And there's only so much you can do. I was watching this new documentary on the Patriots called Dynasty. There's a reason I'm going to say this, but they were talking about when Brady's coming out and Bledsoe wants his job back. And they realized that Bledsoe just really wasn't that agile out of the pocket, right? He couldn't run. He couldn't do this. Biden politically is the same way. He can't get out of the pocket. There's only certain places that he can go. He can stand and give a speech and read the teleprompter. But the second he goes off, he just starts rambling about dead people and, foreign leaders from the past. They know that. And the last thing you want to do is let that guy get out there. And even when he tells the stories, there's a mixture of having conversations with dead people and then just telling things that are patently false. Like these things that he talks about, his credentials. I graduated with, top of my class with a scholarship. None of that was true. He talks about these conversations that he had on this Amtrak train with one of the conductors. That's not true. So you have to pick. Do you want him going off on random tangents that are seemingly just nonsense words, or just making crap up? But it's going to be one of the two.
If you're the Obama Soros political brain trust of the Democratic Party, and I believe that's what runs the Democratic Party today, I don't think there's any question. What do you think they're thinking right now? What do you think they're thinking going into this campaign?
Yeah, that's a great question, because there's two things at play here. There's the Biden team, the Steve Ricchetti, the Bruce Reed, the Anita Dunns, who have been around Biden forever, who need him to stay in power. He is their, it's the Weekend at Bernie's thing. He needs to be the body the vessel for them to get things done. They don't, they're using him to enact an agenda. Biden is inherently, I think, upset at how he was treated in 2016 with respect to Obama. Remember, Obama pushed him to the side and said, "It's not your turn, it's Hillary's." Biden has been bitter and held a grudge since then. So there's this rivalry that is beneath the surface, and that goes to your question. I think the Obama team wants somebody new in there. They want somebody that's the next generation or whatever. They feel, I think, like a little embarrassed by the fact that this was their guy, right? They put Joe on the stage. He was the VP, and he bumbles now. And so I think they want something, but the team Biden, people shouldn't underestimate when all these conversations come about replacing him, whatever, that there is a machine that wants him there, that needs him there.
Would that machine transfer to Kamala Harris? Or does she have a completely different machine?
No. In fact, if you believe any of the rumors, all the way up to Joe Biden. I mean, Joe Biden apparently has never forgiven Kamala Harris for that racial attack that she made in that debate. And then a lot of the folks that I maintain some degree of connection to on the other side really think that she was Biden's pick and she was no one else's. They would rather see her go. A Gavin Newsom, a Pete Buttigieg, someone who can articulate the progressive tenets of the future or who they want. I mean, she can't communicate her lunch order, never mind where they want the movement to go.
Yeah, I think one of the stupidest things that Biden has ever done, and maybe advised to do, was to declare that his running mate was going to be a black woman. Because at that moment he limited himself to, from theoretically hundreds to maybe 5.
But so let me posit to you in this way. I wrote a book called Radical Nation, and I made the following hypothesis. When you are a politician, or frankly, when you're in any job, right, you have metrics. I'm sure every year that you go to the people who help fund the Media Research Center or the board of directors and say, this is what we've accomplished. We called out the media this many times, this many videos got carried. I mean, there's some degree of here's how we define success. What Joe Biden has declared, and he said it on the campaign trails, I'm going to be the most progressive president ever. He didn't talk about creating jobs or massive projects that were going to lead the way. He has appointed, think about it, everyone. It started at Kamala Harris, first black woman. Then it became the first gay black female press secretary. Then it became the first LGBTQIA C3PO person in the cabinet with Pete Buttigieg. They appointed the first transgender person to be a 4-star. Granted, it's in the health services, not the military. But you go over and over again, go down the list of who he has surrounded himself with. It's always about identity politics. The goal of Joe Biden has to become the North Star of progressive politics. He wants that next person to come in and say, okay, Joe Biden appointed 4 gay black people. We now have to appoint 5 to be better than him. He wants to be the FDR of identity politics as opposed to policy. And so for him, he doesn't care that she's not qualified. He wants to be able to say, I was the one that put a black woman as the vice president. And I ultimately believe that that's what he wants his legacy to be going forward. He wants to figure out a way to cement her as the first black female president. I don't think that that's going to happen. I don't think they figured it out yet, but that's his ultimate goal. He wants to be able to say, I did this. I got it done. I'm the one. You always have to give me credit. You'll always have to say that it was Biden that did it first.
Yeah, it's such a tragedy, Sean, because if you're not in the day-to-day of government operations, you don't know when you watch something on television and you see somebody from some government department, all the way going up to the Secretary of Defense, asking yourself the question, is this the most talented guy here? Or was this guy given the job because he was black? Is this a woman that was given the job because she was a woman? And what a slight it would be to that person if that person was there because he was the most qualified. But this administration has just blurred the lines between qualifications and tokenism.
I think it's a shame, to your point, because there are so many qualified people that would win out in jobs regardless of their gender, the color of their skin. And on their side, you know, when he searched for a vice president, he said, I'm going to choose a black woman. He said the same thing about the Supreme Court justice. Wouldn't it have been better if he went through the search and they came out that way and it was like, wow, this person is the most qualified, as opposed to limiting the pool in the first place? And that way, to your point, if you're the person who get picked, you have to always think in the back of your head, did I get chosen because I was really the best, or because Biden limited the pool to such a degree that there are only so many people that qualified?
Did you think you would ever live to see the day where Democrats were advocating for segregated schools while Republicans were quoting Dr. Martin Luther King about judging people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin? Did you ever think we would ever see this kind of role reversal?
No. I mean, I think what's happened with respect to race has been, we were moving in one direction and we did a sharp U-turn where everything now is predicated on not only your skin color, but whether you're willing to atone for your skin color if you're not one of the minority groups. And I think that's a shame because, again, it sets us back from where I thought we were headed. Maybe not as quick as some people wanted, but we were headed in the right direction. But to the broader point of what you're asking, on almost a daily basis, I am shocked by the next iteration of what happens. And let me explain. I feel like the other day, this story comes out, very limited, that says the Biden administration has flown 320,000 illegals into this country, flown them in, not let them in, went and got planes, picked them up and brought them here, and not a peep, with the exception of the Daily Mail. And I'm thinking to myself, that should be a massive scandal. And you go down the list of things to say, you know, on the night of Super Tuesday, Jen Psaki was joking that immigration was the top issue in Virginia. And Rachel Maddow and Joy Reid got in on the fun and started talking about it just days after a Venezuelan who was in the country illegally raped a young woman here in Virginia. And I'm thinking to myself, if that had happened a few years back, they would have been fired and NBC would have had to put out a statement. But it's now okay. It's acceptable to mock these kind of issues and thoughts and actions because how far the left has pushed the envelope.
Yeah, and I think it's going to catch up to them. I think it already is. I mean, the Democrats are living off an agenda of the politics of fear, whether it is gender warfare, whether it is class warfare, whether it is racial warfare.
Or legal lawfare. I mean, I think what they've done at the court, the idea that you can take somebody off a ballot for a crime that they've never even been charged with and nobody bats an eye. And the Supreme Court comes out with a unanimous decision, 9-0, and the liberals then decry the court when you've got crazy liberals I mean, I just cannot believe that we've gotten to the point where the left argues, well, we don't like the person, we'll just take them off the ballot. And they're the ones who accuse people of attacking democracy. It just, as I said, I don't know if I should just get over it or continue to be outraged. But on a daily basis, the line just keeps getting further and further away, where I'm like, this is nuts. The idea that this is not outrageous, this is not causing some kind of reaction or controversy or crisis, because these guys just push the envelope as to what's acceptable when it comes to left-leaning progressive policies.
Well, I don't believe, Sean Spicer, I don't believe that the Democratic Party today is anything like the Democratic Party was 10 years ago.
Correct.
I think the left today is nothing compared to what it was 10 years ago. The Joe Liebermans, the Ted Kennedys, the George McGoverns would never buy into this. My firm belief is those people wanted to change America. The left today wants to destroy America.
Yeah.
Well, the idea that called Donald Trump that he's trying to end democracy in America is just the other way around. The Colorado decision proved that they're trying to undo the democratic system in America today. No, they want to see this country destroyed. But look, I think America, it really is catching onto this. You look at race politics. They're scared to death because blacks and Latinos are going to the Republican Party now. Gender politics. It's not working. Nobody cares about that. But here's the interesting one, I think. The class politics. They're going to roll out this on Biden's State of the Union. He's going to put this whole checklist of accomplishments and positive economic data, jobs created, stock market going up, et cetera, et cetera. And all of those numbers will be true. On the other hand, America will go to the grocery store and see that they can't afford a steak, and never mind going out to dinner. America will go to the gas station and say, well, gas prices may be going down. They're still double what they were when Donald Trump was president. Americans will be looking at their heating bills and their electricity bills and saying, I've got to turn off my electricity on Tuesdays because I can't afford this. Yeah. That's the reality of the world. So my belief is, Sean, comment on this, that the more radical the left becomes, the better it is for the Republican Party, because there you make the distinction.
Yeah, look, I agree with you to some extent, but it almost, I feel like we slow it down. I want to believe what you're saying is true. I hope that what you're saying is true. I haven't seen it. We slow it down. So you think about some of these companies that have made tremendous footfalls by going out there and going way too far. They get punished, but that's about it. And then they bounce back. I mean, they make a mistake. You think of like a Target. They come out, they get all this backlash about their tuck bathing suits and the pride, and yet for a couple of weeks it was painful, and then it's like back to normal. And I think what happens is they push the envelope. They figure out how close to the edge they can get. They go a little too far. There's backlash. They pull back just a little, but they've made progress. And that's the thing, is that they'll drive all the way to the edge of that cliff. They push it a little too far, they get blowback, and then they dial it back just a few inches to get back from the cliff. But you think about how far they've come in the process. And that's the thing, is that there's a difference. It doesn't rebound to where it was. Conservatives aren't turning back the clock. We're just slowing the car down from driving forward.
Well, I believe that conservatives and Republicans have been on defense since Ronald Reagan. Our idea of, and you see it with every move in Washington, D.C., the Republicans will call a victory when they have surrendered less than they were going to surrender last week.
Right.
So if they've gone back 5 yards, not 8 yards, in a compromise, that's a victory to them. Whereas the Democrats are, as I said, they're constantly going as far as they can, and they stop, regroup, and keep on always moving forward. And my advice to Republicans, my advice to Mike Johnson, my advice to Kevin McCarthy, to all these guys is articulate a vision moving forward. You'll have America behind, right? It's just a very simple proposition. Articulate. I think Donald Trump would have, God, he won. He won in 2016. By the way, Sean Spicer, I'm the only person on record who is ever going to admit that I looked Donald Trump in the eye and I told him, you can never win. So there. Don't ever.
That's usually not what people go out there and admit these days. But
that's because I'm all by myself on that one. No, but I believe that he could have won in a bigger way in 2016, and I think he can win in a very big way. And this is our last question that I'll ask you to comment on. In 2024, by not just attacking Biden, but reminding America of where we were at the start of his administration in 2017 and where he ended in 2020, and simply saying to the American people, I'll just do it again. I'm going to go play golf in Scotland. I'll be back on Election Day. You guys tell me what you all want to do. Do you want Biden and a continuation of that, or do you want Trump and a continuation of that? It's black and white. Take your pick. Yep. Should he do that? Will he do that?
Yes, he should. And I think that the night of Super Tuesday, he did that. He got out there. He talked about the border. He talked about energy independence, low unemployment rate. He talked about where we were in terms of foreign incursions, that Russia hadn't invaded anybody during his 4 years, that Hamas hadn't attacked Israel. China was very much worried about him. They weren't firing missiles. They weren't being provocative. They were concerned that Donald Trump, I always tell people, I was with him at Mar-a-Lago during those Syria attacks. He excused himself from dinner, was sitting there with President Xi. We went down to this makeshift secure room. We watched the bombing in Syria, and then he walked back up, looked over at President Xi as dessert's being served, and says, sorry, I had to go downstairs and watch a bombing in Syria. And Xi's like, he had these guys on their heels. I think that you're absolutely right, though. He needs to go out there. This is the first election in 100 years in this country. President versus president. I've been in campaigns for 30 years. It's usually a hypothetical, a theoretical.
Yeah, yes.
I will promise you this. I will fight for that. Donald Trump just says, here's what I did. And he did that the night of Super Tuesday. And he said, contrast that with Joe Biden. So here's where we are energy-wise. Here's where we are unemployment-wise. Here's where interest rates are. Here's where gas prices are. Here's where the border was. Over and over, an issue after issue after issue. I agree with you. If I had to script this personally, I would say, don't talk about any person. Literally just say, this is what I did. This is where things are. You choose.
And then on the other side of Pennsylvania Avenue, had the Republican leadership put forward a legislative agenda to enact those things. You put those two things together, I think the Republican Party will destroy the Democrats. I could be wrong, but that's my view.
Well, I mean, look, so one, just to add a dose of reality to our conversation, Trump is who he is. And there's a reason that, every time somebody says, if he didn't tweet, if he didn't do this, and I'd say, well, then he wouldn't be who he is. That's part of who his is. You can't go, hey, Sean, you'd be great if you were 6'4" and could dunk a basketball. I mean, I'm 5'6". It's not, you can't make people into who they're not. Right. Donald Trump is who he is. He's a fighter. That's okay. And the other thing is the Congress is going to wait to take their cues from him. I wish they could put forward an agenda that says, here are the 10 things that we would fight for if we got done. It blows my mind that we can't do that. It blows my mind that we can't, with everything that's happening at the border, just say that's where we're going to plant our flag. It's about human trafficking. It's about fentanyl. It's about national security. You couldn't have been given a bigger political gift to campaign on, and Republicans keep blowing it. So I think that the best we can hope for is that Donald Trump goes out there, does exactly what we said, which, as I said, he's already doing. If he can stay on that and just continue to remind people, here's what I did for you, here's what he did to you, he wins. And he carries along a Republican Congress.
On that note, Sean Spicer, thank you so much for being on the inaugural episode of the Brent Bozell Show. Thank you for everything you're doing. In the days to come, your voice is going to be more and more important because you've got a news media that are going to do everything to obfuscate this in this election season. So keep it up, and thank you, Sean, for being with us.
Well, I was going to say, it's a pleasure to be on with you on the inaugural episode, but also I just want to commend what you guys do and your team. Tim and Curtis and everyone at the Media Research Center who keeps the media accountable. I was going to say keeps them honest, but that's never going to happen. They keep them accountable. I love having you guys on my podcast because we can talk about these issues and expose what's happening, because so many people wake up and assume that they're getting fed the information that's important, and it is frankly in many cases misinformation. The work that you guys do at the Media Research Center is so critical, especially in this election cycle. So I appreciate all of your team coming on my podcast, being purveyors of getting that information out. So thanks for leading the charge on that front.
Happy to do it. Take care, my friend.
You bet. Thanks, Brent.